Good morning, everybody. I had this invitation from Professor Konur. I was initially reluctant to come, but upon his insistence, I agreed, and I find now that the theme of this talk is more relevant to library science because that is part of the problem that we face in higher education. So, this lecture will initially look at some of the concerns of higher education in India, including the problems of library running, finance, and other things, and then interpret this whole thing as an ethical issue and look at some of the solutions that are possible. So, let us see what are those concerns that people have expressed on higher education in India. There is a declining interest in admission into science courses, science careers, pursuit of science, as we see that most of the bright students are essentially going to professional courses and other areas. There is an absence of equity in access to quality education. This has been repeatedly mentioned by many people. There is a declining standard of teaching science, social science, and humanities. I am particularly referring to biology as a natural science, as I am a practicing biologist. Unfortunately, in the last few 30, 40 years, the educational training has been taken over by coaching centers, which many of them have opened right at the gates of the institution. There is a conflict of interest between personal and professional lives of students. I am talking about science students, what they do between 10 to 5 and what they do in their houses. There seems to be a lot of conflict of interest. Increasing perception of science as an esoteric activity unrelated to daily life experience. This dissociation of scientific practice from daily life experience is something that has hurt the practice of quality science. There is an unmanageable learning burden for students and surprisingly for teachers. This is being increased because of syllabus revision or updating. There is a dichotomy in the level of joy between doing science and probing science. People read a lot of popular science articles in newspapers and other magazines and then think that pursuit of science is simply a voyage of joy. But actually, practicing of science is not so, and this conflict has to be resolved. Pursuing science without scientific method, this is particularly you see in remote areas, in small areas of country, because science has to be pursued with scientific temper. Our daily life does not inculcate any scientific temper, and that affects the quality of science. There is a confused thinking and wrong perception of science, especially biology, as an unethical activity. People hear of many things about what biologists do, like gene manipulations and others, and so believe that this is an unethical activity. In addition, we have the problem of poor infrastructure for natural sciences in terms of accessible and affordable facilities, including library, laboratory, supportive administration, and others. This is on one hand, but then there is a more important problem of uninspiring and incompetent faculty, on the other hand, are two major reasons for the sorry state of affairs in higher education institutions of our country. I will also raise in this context an important question: should everybody do a PhD? This is part of our problems of doing research, and this is one such problem. No, everybody need not do a PhD. I am talking about science. It's a long journey. You need passion, patience, and commitment. In practice, it is not anywhere resembling an ideal activity. There is no joy in the pursuit in 99% of cases. The system is moth eaten and is a crumbling structure. There are very few real mentors who nurture students, departments, etc. Incompetence, lack of scholarship, and talent among faculty is appalling. 99% of people in academics are there for getting career benefits and not to achieve anything worthwhile. Most of them do not inspire anybody. Academia has become a Ponzi scheme, and doing a good PhD is not worth the torture and agony. There is highest unemployment and underemployment among PhDs. Funding is very restrictive and patternless. Leaders have no vision. Mafias hijack funding, awards, etc. 1% of people get all the funds, awards, and patronage. In this miserable condition, in a lighter vein, I want to tell you that a research scholar, after he passed away, went up, and here is the conversation. It says that the person who is going to punish him says that you should go to hell, but since you have a PhD, we will count as time served. It's a real joke, but it's telling comment. I'll also tell you something from the newspaper recently. Amrita University research scholar committed suicide because of a minor difference of opinion with her boss. Now, this is a tragic event. Every day, such events are happening in our campuses, and therefore, it becomes a whole thing has become an ethical issue. Part of this is the present state of affairs in the libraries, because the cost of investment, cost of subscription to hundreds and thousands of journals has become a nightmare for librarians. I look at it as a wholly ethical issue. I will interpret this and explain this now. Let us understand the word ethics itself in the context of two related words: morals, laws, and ethics. Moral is an individual conscience driven attitude. There is no judicial intervention. It is an individual behavior. Law is made by the state or the central government. It is a legislative practice which becomes a law, and there is a judicial intervention. The people can complain or for anything. Ethics is neither moral nor law. It is usually referring to professional ethics. Expected social conduct among members of a group. It can be religious group, science academies, lawyers, medical practitioners. That constitutes ethics, or what is otherwise called best practices of that social group. It is not subject to judicial scrutiny. This is what we have to understand very clearly. There is no crime and punishment situation. It is voluntary activity. Social good takes precedence over individual success. How to recognize this unethical practice? Any action giving anything, it doesn't matter what the action is, which has an intention to cheat the system can be called as unethical. Of course, this has to be discovered whether there was a unethical intention, but that is a difficult task. Please remember that ethical concern therefore becomes necessary for all philosophical, scientific, and even religious investigations, all of which seek truth. So ethics is part of the discussion when we talk of truth seeking activity in any enterprise, be it science, be it religion, or any other thing. There is a biological basis for this concern for ethics. I am giving you one small example. These are Atlantic puffins, birds, and it is very interesting to notice that they choose their mate for life. You can call it in Kannada as Ekapatni Vrata, and you see that these group of birds practice this. Now, do we call this moral or ethic or law? It is for us to understand. In the case of publications, as this conference is more concerned about, here is a news: one publisher and 7,000 retractions because of complaints of plagiarism and other problems. You also notice a lot of sexual harassment in science and scientific establishment. I don't have to go into detail. Everybody is hearing about all these things. And therefore, we have this concern of problem. One, ethics of science in running science, funding, governance. And the second is ethics in science, This is for the practitioners of science, how they practice, whether they follow ethical rules and practices is called ethics in science. Now, if you see ethics of science, science is a huge enterprise and highly institutionalized. Desire to be ethical in the practice of science is a function of intelligence. Desire for truth leads to ethical practices. This is more so in value judgments, rankings, awards, funding, examinations, selections, promotions, etc. Accountability in every activity of science, research, and education alone will ensure ethical decisions. All activities like conducting examinations, guiding PhD students, teaching, publishing research findings, and claiming credit should serve in letter and spirit the purpose of underlying such ethical activity. I'll give one example. All of you students of doing PhD in any natural science or social science, you are supposed to pass the national eligibility test, otherwise called as NET. But there are a lot of ethical concerns in that. If you look at the way it is conducted and the purpose for which it is conducted. For UGC, NET qualification is a eligibility for lecturership, and the qualities of a candidate required for lecturership are totally different from the questions that they are asking in the NET exam. But how is this happened? UGC obviously has not understood this NET exam purpose. There is a mismatch of syllabus and purpose of exam. There is plenty of history. I won't go into detail about it. If you look at CSIR, one of the scientific research organizations, they actually conduct NET exam for the science students, and the purpose for which they conduct is that the students who clear this will be having or will be given some monetary benefit in the form of fellowship, and therefore the purpose of NET exam clearance for as far as CSIR is concerned is only to get fellowship to do research. It has nothing to do with qualities required for lecturership, which UGC interprets. So here is a confusion which is an ethical problem. This is on a lighter vein. Our exam systems is moribund and has no purpose. Here is an example where Einstein has referred to this, that you call all the vertebrates and ask them to climb the tree and say that whoever comes first in reaching the top will get the recognition, and you can see that the fish will always feel that it is a third class student because it can never climb a tree. So the exam must match what the student has, talent, whereas we conduct exam to know what we want them to know. It is this mismatch between purpose of an exam and the actual talent of the student is what is a ethical problem. Science is about art of a measurement. Most of you who are science students understand this statement. Science is a new philosophy of life, seeking truth in the structure and functioning of nature. Experimental natural philosophy or natural science is a product of Renaissance in Europe during the 15th century. It limits its questions to material world, including living organisms. No supernatural principle or phenomena is admitted. Revelation is not a scientific method. Francis Bacon, René Descartes, Immanuel Kant, Bertrand Russell, Karl Popper, Thomas Kuhn, and others defined science and explained it. It does not demand faith or belief. On the other hand, faith, as we see in the case of religion, does not demand logic. There is only one ethics here, ethics of excellence, which we seem to have forgotten. Scientists work for recognition and not for discovering the truth. No award, honor, decision, selection is unanimous. We understand all these things. At best, it is based on consensus, and at worst, it is acrimonious. Read it as political. Comparison is inevitable whenever measurement is undertaken. One can only measure quantifiable parameters. Quality, significance of scientific work is not a quantifiable parameter. A truly great research finding stands the test of time and becomes part of society's cultural memory. Here is a book as every one of you should read this, by Ajanta Subramaniam, who is a professor at Harvard University, and it's a very provocative title, The Caste of Merit. Every one of you should read this book and realize what is the truth about the so-called merit in our system. Here is another book which scientific people should read, very provocative title, Scientists Greater Than Einstein. We all consider Einstein as one of the greatest scientists and therefore a genius. And this book says there are many who are greater than Einstein, because the way you measure greatness is different in this book compared to what normal scientists do. And here, the greatness is measured how much of your work, scientific work, is bringing or wiping the tears of poor people or those who are suffering. It is that is called great scientific work, and not revealing the truth of nature. It's a very telling book. Every one of you should read this. Normal science requires intelligence to solve problems. Intelligence is convergent thinking. Creativity is divergent thinking, or imagination, or innovation. Average science progresses by small increments. This is accomplished by intelligent and interesting work. When paradigm shift occurs in any field, in the words of Thomas Kuhn, it is precipitated by creative work of extraordinary quality. People like Charles Darwin, as far as biology is concerned, or Einstein, or Max Planck, as far as physics is concerned, these are examples of the highest creative work. To make it more clear, I will take 10 names from history, random names, and you will notice that 8 of them are from humanities and social sciences, or performing arts, or technology. Only 2, Albert Einstein and Satyendranath Bose, our own Indian, these 2 did basic science of highest quality. So, except in the case of highest quality basic science, all other examples of creative geniuses are from humanities, performing arts, or technology, engineering and technology, which is very clear if you read the list. Humanities and technology fields have creative geniuses. Only basic science of highest quality requires creativity. Normal science does not require creativity. Only intelligence is required to solve problems. Technological creations remain in public memory for a long time. Many basic discoveries did not become famous until a technological intervention made them famous, like the discovery of penicillin. Anything useful to mankind is considered greater than mere fundamental scientific information. All right. That's why this book says 1001 inventions which have shaped human history and human civilization. Even mentorship, which is what the PhD guide is supposed to be called as a mentor, even this, there are a lot of ethical dimensions. Students innocently, they choose guides without any thinking or analysis. You must choose a guide, which are here for the sake of discussion. We have made it as 4 types. You choose that guide which matches, whose qualities of mentorship matches with your own qualities of mind. And these 4 are mentioned here. There are scientists who publish very high quality papers, that too at a very high frequency, and that too which have very high significance. These are the rock stars. On the other end, you have junior people who don't publish much and who don't have much quality or significance. And there are others who fall in between. You choose based on your mental abilities a particular guide or a mentor, and then life will be happy. When you make mistake, then you will regret it later. There are a lot of research dilemmas based on wrong policies, which are listed, some of them here. These also are matters of ethical concern. Ultimate truth is you do what you are happy with, what you enjoy. You don't do anything because somebody asks you to do that. Basic versus applied work, many people have to make decision. Applied versus translation research, teaching versus research, professional work versus exclusive passion, locally or globally important work. All these are choices which we have to make when we pursue science as a career, and these will create some ethical problems in at one stage or other. So I am raising this point. Where do ethical issues come in science? I have listed few. This is not an exhaustive list, but some of you may be knowing many others. These are listed here as a point for discussion. Animal ethics and biomedical research. Most of you know biomedical research involves use of animals, and we have strong rules and regulations in how to handle animals. For a long time, there were no ethical guidelines, but now we have full list of ethical guidelines, and people have to follow this. Development versus environmental health. Any industrialization or establishment of a manufacturing industry will create some amount of damage to environment, and today we see a conflict of interest between the environmental activists and the development recommenders, and this is an ethical issue. I call this as ethics of science. Biodiversity conservation and bioprospecting. Biologists will understand that biodiversity is everything. If we keep destroying our biodiversity, ultimately man himself will get destroyed. And therefore, there is a concern for biodiversity conservation. But on the other hand, reductionist biology, medical practice will tell you that you will have to get lot of medicines from plants and animals and all. For that, you will have to destroy the biodiversity. How do we resolve this conflict? This is an ethical conflict, ethical issue. This is also an ethics of science. Career craze for social recognition is also a problem for ethics of science. Plagiarism of data, results, and ideas. The librarian is particularly concerned with this. This is something becoming a very serious problem nowadays. We will talk about it later in the context of buying journals, subscription to journals, and all that. Nurturing academics versus building careers. This is something that we see as majority of people who have invaded our higher education system come from middle class. Middle class wants job, not work. And that is the difference when we say you want to nurture your academics or you want to build a career. It's a difficult choice, but then based on whether you come from middle class or when you come from an intellectually passionate family, you make proper decision. They are also ethical concern of publishing, patenting, and perishing. These are all ethical issues because in the craze for publication, we know a lot of unethical practices have been indulged in, and that even governments are now noticing all these things, and there is a serious movement to bring in ethical rules and regulations for conducting science, especially publishing results. Teaching evolution and creation of life by God. Most of the biologists today believe in Darwinian evolution theory, but there are places in the world where they are still teaching that whole biodiversity was created by God. Now, this is an ethical issue because we are not discussing the science behind it. We are only worried that if you tell anything that is controversial to student, you are creating problem. Therefore, let the student choose whatever he wants to believe. Your job is to teach science, and you give the evidences for science and teach only Darwinian revolution. It is up to the audience to make a decision. Is innovation encouraged in practice is a controversial statement. Publishing, which is what this present conference is about, an unpublished research work is as good as not done. In the olden days, printing and publishing journals was a service to community and was run on low margins of profit and on ethical principles. Today, publishing has become an unethical business. I don't have to go into detail, all of you are aware of that, especially the librarians. A handful of greedy publishers have monopolized over 90% of publishing and are run for huge profits. Hiding behind paywalls, publishers have made the primary producers of research findings and written articles to pay heavily to publish and later access their own published research. Professional society journals are charging high as page charges, even or article processing charges. Even open access journals, this conference is supposed to discuss all these things. Like scientific reports, PLOS One and others, they charge heavily. So scientists from developing countries cannot afford to publish even in these so-called open access journals. That is why there is an ethical crisis today. What do we do for this? Is there a solution? Yes. Modern experimental Indian science comprises mostly camp followers. This is a very harsh statement. Colonial rulers brought us Western science in all aspects. As you know, we got science from British rule when they established the three first universities, Calcutta, Madras, and Bombay, and brought in English as a medium of instruction, and they brought in teaching of Western science or the post Renaissance Western science, raising questions, identifying problems, pursuing research, experimental approach, vicious circle of publishing, citation, impact and recognition, etc. Indian scientists largely follow the work of US and European scientists, ignoring more than 50% of work done by non-Europeans and non-USA based science. Open science and open access publishing, the theme of this conference, will only solve the problem partially. We need to address not US generated problems but nationally relevant problems. We need to emphasize originality of work. We need to re-establish the best practices of Western, Hindu, Islamic, Buddhist, Chinese, Jain traditions of doing science. Science, like philosophy and religion, seeks truth. I have already mentioned about it, and ethics is the basis of this approach. If you look at the new education policy 2020, done or executed by Kastur Rangan committee, there are a lot of ethical dimensions in implementing this. You also, I have already mentioned about the use of animals in biomedical research and the ethical problems that arise out of that. We ourselves, Prakash Tandon, myself and Gupta, we edited a book on use of animals in scientific research and education, how to follow the ethical guidelines, and students should read these things before they venture into biomedical research. Recently also, we have edited a book on the general ethics of scientific research, education and governance, including funding. Myself, Amit Ghosh and Ashok Singhvi, Vice President, at the then Vice President of International Science Academy, we edited this book. A lot of contributions from a number of people, great scientists. It is worthwhile to read this. In fact, UGC has now made a 2-credit course on ethics of science compulsory as part of research methodology for all PhD scholars, both from natural sciences and social sciences. And therefore, this lecture has summarized some of the problems faced in the pursuit of higher education, including the problems of library, including the problems of doing research, quality research. And these, I believe, have only one dimension. These are part of ethical issues, and so we should seek ethical answers for that. I have given some solutions, and because of want of time, I will not discuss many more of this. I once again thank you for your patience in listening to me, and thank the organizers, especially Professor Konur, for giving me the platform to address you people. Thank you very much.